Hi friends, I'm Pam and welcome to A Scrappy Little Joy. Today we are working on our block 14. Here it is. It's called A Whirl of Joy. And this is one of the funnest blocks to make. I love this. The other thing about this block is that we are, this episode, if you will, we're also going to be doing a little bit more joining. So what you will note, okay, let me just do my usual spiel. Here's our block. And then for those of you who may be new here, we are on block 14 of our Weekly Whim project. This is a one block at a time adventure that we are on. And if you are new and you want to know more, go ahead and look in the playlist called the Weekly Whim Project. And that will tell you everything you need to know. Block 1, for sure, will tell you everything you need to know to join in with what we are doing here. Down below in the description center section is always where you will find our cutting instructions. And our fabrics today, we are running low. It feels like there's quite a stash still in here, but I'm running out of certain things. In fact, one of my sample blocks that I made for this, I had to use different fabrics because remember I'm now making 3 blocks so that I can start to assemble that back in the other studio. Okay, so these are my fabrics. There's just a few for this block. And so that can go in here. Also, you will note in your description, or on your cutting sheet, that I have indicated that we need to be bringing, what did we say? You'll need to bring your block 13. Where is it? Oh, I guess I put it here. Your block 13, right here, as well as 8 scrappy backgrounds if you're using multiple different backgrounds. 8 3.5-inch squares, which is what it says on here. Or if you're using just a solid background, you could conceivably bring 1 6.5 by 12.5-inch rectangle, okay? All right, so we'll set that aside for a second and we'll put our box. And for those of you who are new, this box is really where we've just been adding all of our fabrics every week that we make a block. If we add any fabrics, we put it in our box and then we reuse those fabrics so that they can start to spread across our quilt. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started because friends, this is it's a little bit involved today, okay? So here's what we have, and we always put our instructions sheet or our cutting sheet here so that we can reference our little illustration. This is such a fun block. I love this because it says we can make pinwheels not only with half square triangles, but we can make pinwheels with flying geese units. So what we have here, oh, I'm a little crooked, aren't I? Here's all of our units, A, B, C, and D. And what you will note here on our pinwheels, these flying geese units have opposite corners on them. My plan before doing this video was to do our everything you never knew you wanted to know about flying geese. But I'm telling you what, the leaves outside got away from us. And so we have spent a lot of time catching up on leaves this week. So I haven't gotten to that video yet. But anyway, we are doing these one at a time. And the reason for that is we have different colors in each corner. And it's really hard to do that if all of the units need to be the same if we did it in a 4 at a time method. So that's why we're doing it in a 1 at a time method. First things first, let's grab our fabric A, rectangles, and then we will need 4 of each of fabric C and 4 of each of fabric B, okay? So let's go ahead and get 4 of each. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you will note that I have put a diagonal line on the back of all of my fabric B and C squares, okay? So let's go ahead and just set this aside for a sec. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at our little illustration here, and you will note what we need is a rectangle, or I'm sorry, a square this side, if you're looking at our pinwheel this way, maybe I'll just use our block. So let's say this is our pinwheel right here. This little block needs a fabric C rectangle in this corner and a fabric B rectangle, a square, I'm sorry, in this corner. So let's go ahead and start with our fabric B, and we're going to sew right on this diagonal line here, and then we'll sew, then we'll trim and press. So remember, for those of you who have followed with me before, when we're doing things like flying geese, it's always best to start on this long edge rather than starting on that corner, because this corner has a tendency to dip right down into the hole of our sewing machine when that needle goes into it. So we avoid that by starting right on this side. Hello, Jane. It has been a week. I bet you it's been a week since I have spent any time a week ago when I was creating block 13. Okay, and I've got my little leaders and enders here. Where are my little snippers? Right here, right where they live. Okay, you go there. Okay, so now what we have here is our, I'm going to scoochy these over here so I can, so what we have here is what will become our flying geese unit. So let's go ahead and trim this, trim a quarter of an inch from the line. Okay, ooh, that's a nice little half square triangle. I'll just save that. And then we're going to press toward, okay, toward the corner. Now, the other thing about this cut size, it is oversized. And I did that for a reason. I wanted you to be able to have some room for trimming. Where is my flying geese trimmer? You know what, friends? I'm going to have Mr. Woods zippy zip through here because I'm going to go ahead and grab it. It's in my other studio. I knew I was going to get a little exercise in this video. Okay, I wanted to have that handy. It's not necessary, but it's useful. Okay, so now let's grab, and remember, we'll just pay attention here, or pay attention here. We'll grab our other fabric C square, and we're going to start here again and sew on that line, okay? Okay, now we're going to do the same thing, and we're going to go ahead and trim a quarter of an inch from that sewn line. I'm going to set that little guy aside. We should come up with something. Help me, friends. If you come up with something that you want to do with the half square triangles from this video, and share them at our Scrappy Little Joy Facebook page, I would love to see it. I would love to see it, and I'll see what I can come up with as well. I pressed that one also toward the corner, so we've got our little half square triangle, or excuse me, our little flying geese unit. I can never tell whether I should call it a flying geese unit or a flying goose unit, but I think it's a flying geese unit, so that's what I'm going to call it. You tell me if it's different. You can always tell me in the comments. I'm curious. I always like to know these things. You guys are so good at sharing. Okay, so I'm going to do 4 units exactly like that, and I'm going to let Mr. Wood zippy right here, and then you and I will come back together on the other end to do our other block. Okay, so now we've got 4 of our little Flying Geese units. So let's talk about trimming these. Okay, do you need a special tool to trim Flying Geese? You do not. However, I will wholeheartedly agree that the block lock unit for Flying Geese is remarkably helpful. So that being said, I'll use my block lock, but let me show you how to trim with or without. If that's not something you have, you just have a standard ruler. I tend to really like the rulers that have, these are creative grids, and they have an 1/8 of an inch line, and the lines are real skinny. So that's why I tend to always reach for these. I've got a square one as well. In fact, yeah, that square one's too small. Okay, so what we need to do is we need this unit to be 3.5 by 6.5, okay? And remember, when we're doing Flying Geese units, we are always going to want to trim that top first, because we always want to make sure that we can keep our point where it needs to be. So let's just say we need 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Remember, we're going to line up our center line is straight in the straight down the middle there. And we're going to take a little trim off here. And if it's 3.5 by 6.5, then we need 3.25 from the center over here in terms of trimming. So 1, 2, 3, and you know I always count because my rulers are always backwards, and I'm okay with that because I'm a lefty, right? So let me just double check here. 1, 2, 3.25. So at the 3.25 inch mark, we want to make sure this line is all the way across, and we're taking 3.25 off. Or well, we're trimming from 3.25 from the edge. So here is, I am 1, 2, 3.25 from that edge. Okay. And then we can trim 3.5 inches from the top edge. Okay, and so that looks like that. Okay, and there is one of our units. So let's go ahead and trim our other units for that. Mr. Wood's good zippy zippy right here. And I'll just trim and you trim, and then we'll come back together for our next units. Oh, wait, let me interrupt. The Flying Geese tool, the block lock, look what happens. This fits right into where your Flying Geese unit is. And that's why pressing our seams out, again, and this isn't really even something that I stock in Serendipity Woods. I did check, there is a distributor that stocks it. It's an exclusive distributor that I just don't usually work with. Doesn't mean that I couldn't get an account. So if I used to have an account, but it doesn't mean that I couldn't. Anyway, if these are really popular and you guys really want them, you can't find them, let me know, and I'll see what I can do to get us hooked up with that. Okay, so yes, so now we can just go back to you trim, I'll trim, and then we'll do our other ones. Okay, there's our guys. Now, what we are going to do is set these little friends aside, and we're going to pull our board back over, and we are going to get our fabric D rectangles, and we are going to get the other 4 fabric C's and the other 4 fabric B's. So now what we're going to do is let's just set these aside and that aside, and we will get our bearings about us for how we want. I was going to fussy cut this one, and I didn't. That's the other thing about doing the 4 at a time method. It's not as easy to fussy cut. It did turn out that my little mouse was right there, and then another one kind of came in the middle pretty well. But if you want to fussy cut, it's a whole lot easier to fussy cut when we're doing 1 at a time Flying Geese units than it is when we're doing 4 at a time. So with that in mind, let's say we want this little mousy guy, this little other unit. We just want to do just what we did in the last, and we want to start, I always start on the right side. You might want to start on the left side. I don't know that it necessarily matters, but I tend to always, like, if I'm starting on the right side, I just start on the right side for all the units in the same block. Not that it matters, because they're not going to show. The seam allowances aren't going to show, but that's how I just tend to do it. So I'm going to put the fabric C square on the right side of my fabric D rectangle, and I'm going to use the fabric B square on the left side of my rectangle. So we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sew all of my C to D, and then I'll trim and press, and you can do the same. And then we'll sew our fabric B squares on the other corner, pressing the same way, pressing toward the corners. And then we'll talk about putting it together, and then we'll talk about what we're doing next, because this baby is going to join with another black straight away. So, okay. Okay, we are ready to assemble our block already. My goodness, that was so fast. But it helps that Mr. Woods is zipping through that part and some those parts where we've got some more repetitive stuff, because when we start to assemble this to its little buddy next to it, we're going to have a little bit more piecing and a little bit more time to talk. Okay, so let's just look at our illustration, and let's sort of set it such that we lay out all of our units going in the directions they're supposed to go in. And of course, you know I have to double check, because it is not above me, beyond me, to really sew something in the wrong direction when I'm not being careful. So I'm taking my time. Why does that seem too big? Because I haven't trimmed them yet. Okay, I'm gonna go back and trim them. I was just so excited to be with you that I forgot to trim. Okay, so I'm going to trim these. Mr. Woods can zippy zip. Okay, hi, welcome back. I missed you. We are all ready to start that again. All righty. Let's get all of our little guys where we want them in accordance with our illustration. And then what we'll do is join these in quadrants, okay? So I am going to join, and I'm always going to try and put the side that has the point, I'm always going to have that one on top, so that I know exactly where my needle is going into the machine, so that I can be sure. Now, very important, remember we trimmed with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance above that Flying Geese unit, right? That means, theoretically, it should be 1/4 of an inch, not a scant 1/4 of an inch here. So that's going to be 1/4 of an inch. If we're doing a Flying Geese, we'll want to do this at an accurate 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, because that's how much we've given it. Otherwise, if we do a scant, it's going to go above our point, and that point won't go right up to the line. So take your time and sew that unit together, and we can simply keep sewing these together the same way. And we don't have to, with a block like this, I think we're safe to sew all of the geese together. And then we can lay them all out once again and make sure that we have them in the right configuration. Yeah, and then so what I'm doing is just sewing so that my needle goes in just above, slightly above or right on that point, right? So that I know my little point's not going to get cut off in my block. And again, remember friends, perfection is the beacon. The joy is in the journey here. And I always say that because the reality is some days we're just not in the mood to worry too much about it, you know? And we're allowed to take our time, and we're allowed to not require ourselves to be perfect at every juncture. In other words, when you have learned how to proficiently, when we have learned how to proficiently sew a block together, that doesn't mean that forevermore all of our blocks must be perfect. We get to just have fun with it, you know? Okay, get my little ender in here. We had a wonderful weekend in that we had leaves to deal with. And we gathered with our kids, some of our adult kids who came over to help. We have a second home, which is Mr. Wood's mom's parents' home. His dad's been gone for a number of years. His mom recently passed away. And so we have that house, and we have to do the leaves. So we got to be with our kids and do a little teamwork. Some of them, the local ones that were available. And we got to do a little bit of teamwork to get the leaves up at that house. The little kids got to play, and I don't know, it's just kind of one of those wonderful times. Anyway, okay, so now what we're going to do is look at how you would want to press this. See how there's just no seam here? That seam, look at that, just wants to lay that way, doesn't it? So let's press toward the outside, all of them, okay? Yeah, so it's one of those moments, if you have children, or whether they're grown or still small, of being with them, and it was like a gift, right? And I just got to watch our grandkids play together and be together. And I got to reminisce as I was doing the push blower, and Mr. Woods and the guys were doing, we had the backpack blowers, right? And I got to just think about all the times that we cleared leaves together as a family when our kids were growing up. And it's just moments you treasure. And you got to stop, right? And you got to stop and soak them up as much as you can. Okay, look here. Do we have it all right, going in the right direction? I feel like maybe not. That way, that way, that way, and that way. Okay, so now let's just join these two together and these two together. Do this. Oh, you're asking me, would these be scant 1/4 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch? They would probably be, because we have a lot of seams in here, I think I'm doing this a scant 1/4 of an inch. So let's do that. Because now that we've got all these folds and everything, these seams going in directions, they're taking up little micro spaces. See what I did there? I was looking for my button to push because I have an automatic thread cutter on my other machine. I love it. That's all right. I love Jane, and Jane needs leaders and enders, and she needs gentle care. And I like working with her sometimes, especially when we're together, because it helps us slow down. All right, let's put that there. And let's put this here. let's do what would make the most sense. Let's press this seam allowance. Well, let's see. This seam allowance would probably lay most comfortably if we pressed it toward the Flying Geese unit. So let's do that, and then these two guys can nest. I like how I think it's important for each block for us to just take our time and decide what's the best way to do this, and what's the best way to press, and all that, and seam allowances for each block, because I hope what it is doing is empowering you to be able to, okay, so we've got our 2 units, and then I might just pin there. It wouldn't be the worst idea. Pinwheels can have the propensity to be a little bit tough. You just want those points together, you know? And so what we could do, we could use a little fork pin, and I'll use the fork pin right here at the point, and I will set it right in the seam, so that these guys are right where we want them. And then I'll put my fork pin in here after I'm going to push that all the way down. That's just saying this is where I want you to stay right there. And then I'm going to use this fork pin, and it's just going to, and then I can pull this pin out, and it's just going to lock those right there. That's why I like to use fork pins. They're fun. When I'm feeling like I really want some precision. And I could pin that one, but I'm gonna just hold it. You can pin it if you like, and I encourage you to do so. No, my point really is that we take our time together to decide each block, because very often, remember I use my seam ripper to pull my fork pin out gently, just before I get to that seam. And then I shouldn't say always, but often enough, we come across a quilt block that doesn't give us instructions on whether we should press open to one side or what. And the ability to grow in that confidence. And the other thing that we are going to find next up is we are going to be sewing to other units that are that may not be as cooperative because we didn't plan it. We're doing this one block at a time, and we're building a quilt. Okay, so look how cute. There's our block. I mean, it's not perfect in the middle there, but you know what I always tend to do here? I'm going to want to press this open. You can twirl your seams. If you've ever seen people twirl their seams, where they can take one little, couple little threads out here. Where's my seam ripper? Couple little threads out here. And then I would say a couple little threads out, meaning, how does it go again? I never remember how to do it until I'm right in the middle of it. So I just am going to take out the last, call it the last thread that I just sewed, or that I would have sewn, right? The last thread in this. And then what I do is I can then press these seams in one direction and these seams in another direction, and then what we see is a little pinwheel here on the back too. And it's not being very cooperative with me, which is why I sometimes don't do it. Let me see. There. No, I know it's this way. So I am suggesting that you not take my instruction on how to make a twirled seam, because this one is not coming out right, and I don't know why. Like, I don't know it until I see it. There, I bet I did it now. Yeah, so this seam will lay this way, and this seam will lay this way, and then we'll have a sweet little twirl here. There it is. You see what I'm doing there? And that little guy goes that way, and we just have a nice little twirl of our seam there. Anyway, what I will try and do is put together an actual video on twirling seams for pinwheels, the backs of pinwheels, because it is useful, because then it makes it for a nice flat unit. Okay, next up, now we have our block 13, and we have all these cute little squares. We want our, what did I do with it? We want our, this block goes on the right, block 14 goes on the right, or whichever. You could really put whichever block you want where, but the way I have it sort of mapped out, this block goes on the right, this block goes on the left, and we've got these babies in the middle. Okay, so what we want to do is lay out a mosaic of squares, and I really don't have a specific plan for this. Let me see, I just kind of want to, like this fabric, I want that over on this side. Maybe I'll put that one down there. And I'm just kind of giving myself a little mosaic design of fabrics so that it just got a scrappy bit of movement. So I am going to sew this row together and this row together, and then we're going to talk about how we want to press, because, so let's do a scant 1/4 of an inch with this, because even though these are just squares, there's quite a lot of them. So we want to make sure that we're accounting for that extra thread sewing space. Okay, so scant 1/4 of an inch. And I'm going to do this so that I don't have to put my leaders and enders in between. And I'm not really super picky about how these are laid out. So one of our friends asked, I think it was at the Facebook group, will I be having a final layout for those that would prefer to keep all of their blocks just in a stack until the very end? You know, I haven't really mapped that out, to be honest. I feel like it's working for us to take a little bit of extra time in these later videos to try and get it to a point where we're all sort of assembling as we go along, so that by the time we get to the end, it will be rather together, because otherwise that will be one great big behemoth video. I don't know that we want to sit through that. So if we go little bites at a time, it feels gentler to me. Let's see how these friends laid out. I think I put that one there, and I think I put this one over here, and this one here. Yeah, so let's do that. Let's get those joined. So yeah, that was really kind of my thought. Will there be a final layout? I suppose we could put that together, yes. Let's see, maybe I want that there. I just don't want those two blues next to each other. I don't know why, I like to be scrappy. Anyway, so what I would say is, as you go along, if you are someone who prefers to just keep all of your blocks together in a stack and then put them together at the end, just go ahead and jot down what it is that we're doing in each video in terms of what needs to be joined and how it goes. And then you'll have a picture of if you want to wait until the very end. Okay, there we go. That is that. Okay, so now when we talk about pressing, and remember at the very beginning and all throughout, I always said, I don't know, we don't know what these are going to be sewing to, because we're building this quilt one block at a time. And so this is coming together nicely, and we've got a little space here, but we've got this seam is pressed open, and this seam is pressed to one side, okay? So rather than wrestle with these units and how we should sew them or how we should press them in relationship to who they're going to match up to, if we press them open, they still can sit comfortably in this quilt. So let's go ahead and press those open. And I will show you how this is not rocket science. Let me just do this over this way. This is not rocket science, and it doesn't always have to be laden with rules. And that's really why my hope, that's really why this project meant so much to me to share with you guys, because it is, we're nuancing this quilt together. And we're doing it one step at a time, one block at a time together. Okay. So now we have these two rows. Let's see, I want that one that way. And now we're going to join them together. They're not nesting, I know. It's more convenient when they nest. However, we can still do them this way. We can still, and you can pin these together if you'd like. I am going to wing it, and I'm going to not pin, but you can pin if you like. I did my other sample in the other room, and it is scant quarter of an inch here. And my points are good. You just want to take your time, see what I'm doing? And I'm being real careful not to tug on these, because those ends of the seams, if they're pressed open, it is a little bit easier for them to come loose. And now I'm just going to grab this one, I'm going to set this, I'm going to make sure these two friends stay together. These two little seams stay together. And we're going to get down to this point after I get my needle over that hump. And then we're going to bring this guy here. And if I've sewn all of these with a scant quarter of an inch, they should all come together pretty comfortably. Okay, now I'll make sure this end is together. So now, once we get this together, we will have 4 of our 19 blocks together. So in this case, I've already pressed open. I may as well press this one open too. And in pressing open, in this case, first of all, let's have a look. Let's see. I mean, pretty good. They went together just fine. They don't have to nest. Nesting is cozy and comfy, but they can come together like that too. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to sew these two together. And this is where you're going to just want to make sure the reason that I made these 2 blocks as they are in terms of size and size of squares, we want these to go together so that these seams join up here and then here in this case, right? But it's not as big of a focus here. Okay, so pinning at the seams is not the worst idea, just to make sure that they fit there comfortably. But is it critical? It isn't. Sometimes I'll do it just because maybe it feels like one of my seams might be a little tighter than the other, but like this one, I kind of want that point to really match right at that point. So just put your pin in there, right where you need it to go, and then it makes your little flying geese point happiest, because it lines right up with that point. Idealisms, just idealisms, not critical. So for those of you who have been so unbelievably encouraging about my A Song to Sing collection arrival, I hope you've had an opportunity to give a call to some of your favorite neighborhood shops or checked online for some of your favorite shops to see if they carry it. And if they don't, if you don't see it in stock, I wanted to wait a little bit, hoping that it takes a little time for it to get to all the shops. And for the shops, I always say it takes sometimes a little bit of time for it to get to the shop and then actually get put into stock, because depending upon what's going on in the store, and that certainly happens in my world too, but yeah, the more people that that ask about it out there, the better. Oh, now see what I did here? It's terrible. All of my open seams are laying the wrong way. Oh well. I can fix that later if I feel like it, or I can not sweat it. Right now I don't feel like sweating it. So then we can do the same thing here. Pinning. That should have solved my problem and kept my seam allowances open, but you know. Perfection is just the beginning. Okay, final seam. Now I'll see if I can think ahead and make sure that all of my underneath seam allowances lay flat. There we go, little guy. Thank you. Nice and flat. So I hope this block has helped you feel a little bit more like, in the event you are sewing something together and it meets with another block that isn't pressed as conveniently, it's not a huge deal. It's not a huge deal. There we go. Look at that. 2 more units together. Look at that sweet little scrappy bunch in the middle. And again, if you are making your Weekly Whim quilt with solids, this is where your 6.5 by 12.5 inch piece would just go and just join those 2 units together. In my world, my world's always a little scrappy, so that's why you see this. Anyway, I hope that was fun for you. If you are new here and you are enjoying what you see, I hope you will click like, subscribe, follow, share it with your friends. We are having the best time here at A Scrappy Little Joy here in the Weekly Whim, and we've got lots of things going on, so we'll see you next time.